Hey everyone, welcome back to class. This is our last lecture. This is our last week of classes. And this week we're talking about bullshit. So this does not appear on any of the unit assignments, but if you haven't turned in all 8 of the required weekly assignments yet, there will be a weekly assignment for this lecture that you can turn in. So we're talking about bullshit. So first, I'm going to try to answer the question, why are we talking about bullshit? What does it mean to say that we're going to have a class lecture about bullshit? Then we're going to talk about lying and what makes lying lying. What makes a false statement a lie as opposed to just a false statement, something that's not a lie, like a mistake. And then we're going to talk about what bullshit is. And so we're going to look at the reading for this week was Harry Frankfurt's On Bullshit, which is an essay, but it was later turned into a book, which you can buy at like Barnes and Noble and stuff, called On Bullshit, which if you're looking for a Christmas present for someone and you think that a book called On Bullshit would be a funny gift, it usually is. So it might be something to look into. So why are we talking about bullshit? Well, according to Frankfurt, in the article we read, one of the most salient features of our culture is that there is so much bullshit. Everyone knows this. Each of us contributes our share, but we tend to take the situation for granted. Most people are rather confident of their ability to recognize bullshit and avoid being taken in by it. So Frankfurt thinks that there is bullshit all around us, that people say bullshit all the time. And we all know that, and we all recognize that, and we all think that we're good at recognizing bullshit. So what is it? If it's rampant, if it's everywhere, then it's worth analyzing what exactly it is. We all think that we're good at recognizing bullshit, that we can tell when something's bullshit, but a lot of us sort of assume others can. If you have a class where you sort of bullshit a paper, you sort of expect that the professor won't realize that you've bullshitted the paper. But of course, the professor thinks that they can tell if a student has bullshit their paper or not. So if we all think that we understand what bullshit is, and it's everywhere, it's worth analyzing what it is, trying to get a real solid grasp of what exactly it is so that we can become better at recognizing it and so that we can maybe understand why people bullshit in the first place. Yeah, quick grammatical note, bullshit can be used as both a verb and as a noun, and I'm going to be using it as both a verb and a noun during this lecture. So, what is bullshit? And how is it different from false statements like lying or deception? Is bullshit a kind of lying? Is it a kind of deception? Or is it something else? Uh, Frankfurt says his analysis isn't meant to be definitive and there's more work to be done. So don't expect this to be like the solid final answer. Frankfurt was sort of the first person to try to really nail it down. His account is still usually taken to be the definitive one, though. So, right. So, because he's sort of the expert on bullshit. Most of the work follows in his footsteps. And so, something much like what we're going to say today is sort of the consensus view among philosophers of language about what bullshit is. So, Frankfurt takes bullshit to be a form of deception. He thinks bullshit is deception. If you are bullshitting someone, then you are on some level deceiving them. But that it's just bullshit is distinct from lying. And Frankfurt says, if you did the reading, you'll remember he says bullshit can be used, the word bullshit can be used as just like an insult or just to say something negative. Like, that's bullshit. That just means you don't like that thing. And that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about bullshit in the sort of not as just a raw insult, but when we say that sounds like bullshit to me, where is that real or is that bullshit? Like, were you being serious or was that bullshit? Like, that's the sense of bullshit that we're worried about here. That use of bullshit, where we're not just saying that's bullshit because we don't like something, but we're actually talking about bullshit. I want to know what it is. So the bullshitter, the person who is producing bullshit, is trying to deceive their audience, but they aren't necessarily lying to their audience. So it's a deception without a lie. And that's sort of an important point, that you can deceive someone without necessarily lying to them. And so the bullshitter, when someone says bullshit, when you say bullshit to someone, you don't necessarily expect or want them to believe what you're saying. That would be a lie. And this makes bullshit different from normal lying. And so it'll help us to get clear on what lying is before we move on to bullshit. And so we're going to focus on that now. What is lying? Because we're going to comparing bullshit to lies will actually help us clarify what bullshit is. So what is lying? Well, there's a YouTube video that I will send that is in this lecture slide, but I'm assuming is not appearing on your screen right now because it didn't work last time. It's a clip from Seinfeld, and I will send out the link in the email. You can find it on YouTube. It's a very short clip. It's just George Costanza, character played by Jason Alexander, saying, "Jerry, just remember, it's not a lie if you believe it." And that's all I want us to get at. Remember, it's not a lie if you believe it. And that's true. When someone lies, they are making a statement that they know to be false. They make the false statement with the intention of getting you to believe that their false statement is true. If you lie to me and say, my dog ate my homework, which is a classic lie that students tell teachers, but it doesn't really work now in distance learning when everything's online. If your dog ate something, first of all, I don't know how a dog ate an email. That's impressive. Second, just, retype it. So my dog ate my homework is a little dated as an example, but it's still sort of a classic example of a lie. My dog ate my homework is a lie. Dogs don't eat homework very often. They'd rather eat food. So if you say, let's say you forgot to do your homework and you don't want to get in trouble for not doing your homework, or you don't want to look bad, you might say to the teacher, my dog ate my homework, or some other lie. And then the lie is something that you know is false. You know your dog didn't eat your homework, but you say it hoping that the teacher will believe you, hoping that the teacher will say, oh, I'm so sorry that happened to you. You can spend the next few days redoing it and submit it, or maybe I'll give you credit for it without you having to resubmit it. You're hoping that they'll believe that your dog ate your homework. So you're making a false statement that you know is false. You're saying your dog ate your homework, and you know your dog didn't eat your homework. Maybe you don't even have a dog. You know what you're saying is false, and you're saying it because you want to hide the truth, which is that you just didn't do it. Maybe because you didn't care, maybe because you forgot, but you didn't do it. And that's the truth that you're trying to hide. You're trying to cover up that truth with this lie. You don't want the teacher to know that you forgot or that you didn't care. You want them to believe that you did do it, but your dog ate it. The goal of the lie is to get the other person to believe your lie. If you remember when we talked about Kantian ethics, Immanuel Kant thinks that lying is always wrong, and thinks that you can sort of show that. One of the ways he thinks you can show that is that if everyone lied, then no one would believe anyone. If everyone lied all the time, then no one would believe anyone, and then lying would be impossible. So if you want lying to be okay, then you want lying to be impossible. That's irrational, that's a contradiction, so lying must be wrong. If everyone lies, then no one will believe anything anyone says. But that makes lying impossible because the whole point of lying is to get the other person to believe your lie, right? Kant thinks if no one believes anyone's lies, then it's impossible to lie because it's impossible to get the other person to believe what you say. And that's the point of lying. It's saying something that you know is false, trying to get the other person to believe it. That's what a lie is. So a liar knows that they're lying. They know that what they're saying is false. It's the George Costanza says it's not a lie if you believe it. Because if you really believe that it's true, then you aren't lying. You're just mistaken. You're saying something that you think is right, but it isn't. It happens to be wrong. You happen to be mistaken. But you're not lying in that case. You're just in error. You've made a mistake, but you really are trying to tell the truth. You're just not succeeding because you don't know what the truth is. But the liar knows what the truth is. The liar knows the truth and is trying to cover up the truth. This is a distinctive feature of lying. Liars know that what they're saying isn't true. The other distinctive feature of lying is that liars want their audience to believe the lie. If the other person doesn't believe the lie you told them, then you did not successfully lie. A successful lie has to be believed by whoever you're lying to. So when you tell a lie, you want the other person to believe your lie. That's the whole point. So that's lying. Lying is saying a false statement that you know is false, trying to get the other person to believe that false statement is true. That's a lie. Now, what's bullshit? There's an example Frankfurt discusses. Quotes someone, I don't know who Fania Pascal is, but they said, I had my tonsils out and I was in the nursing home feeling sorry for myself. Wittgenstein's a philosopher from the early half of the 20th century. He's born in Germany or Austria, something in the Germanic area of Europe, and then worked in Cambridge from World War I until he died in the 60s. Fania Pascal says, I feel just like a dog that has been run over. And Wittgenstein was disgusted. He said, you don't know what a dog that has been run over feels like. And Wittgenstein got mad. Now, Wittgenstein was being unfair. That was clearly meant to be hyperbole. Wittgenstein took it literally and thought it was bullshit. And it's bullshit because, or in part because, Pascal is making a claim with no idea as to whether or not it's true. So the liar knows what's true and is trying to cover up the truth. The liar wants you to believe the lie they're telling you. But the bullshitter might not even know whether or not the thing they're saying is true. It's just bullshit. They don't necessarily care if what they're saying is true. That isn't the point of their statement. And in that way, bullshit is kind of this perversion of how talking is language and communication is supposed to work. In general, when you communicate, you're trying to communicate true information or find out information. If you say the words, I am sick, or I feel sick right now, the role that those words, that sentence is supposed to play is that a person who is actually sick says it, and then other people know that they're sick. Like that's the role that sentence is meant to play in language. I feel sick now. Someone says it because they are sick, and then other people now know that they are sick. And when you lie, when you say I feel sick right now, and you don't actually feel sick, that's sort of misusing the language in some way, because something that's meant to communicate information is now being used to deceive. It's being used to give a false information, to give false belief to whoever you're talking to. So lying is in some sense a misuse of how language is supposed to be used. When you lie, you're using words that are meant to communicate information and using them to deceive people. Bullshit is similarly misusing language, but it's not misusing it in the same way. So bullshit, like uh I feel like a dog that's been run over, isn't meant to communicate true information. It's just meant to give some sort of impression. The person doesn't care whether or not you believe that it's true, right? Pascal doesn't care whether Wittgenstein thinks it's literally true that they feel like a dog that's been run over. They are just saying it because they want Wittgenstein to feel sympathy for them and their illness. The bullshitter doesn't care whether or not you believe what they're saying, and they don't care whether or not it's true. They might not even know that it's false. They might know it's false, but they might not. The bullshitter isn't trying to get you to believe their statement. They're trying to create an impression or to get a certain result. So Pascal wants sympathy. And so they say something like, I feel like a dog that's been run over. Not because it's true, and not because they want Wittgenstein, they want the audience to believe it, but because they want sympathy. And they think that saying this will get them sympathy. And that's bullshit. It's not trying to get you to believe what the bullshitter is saying. It's trying to get a certain reaction or trying to get you to believe something about them. The bullshitter is deceiving you, but they're not deceiving you the same way the liar is. The liar's trying to hide the truth. My dog ate my homework is trying to hide the fact that I didn't do my homework. But a bullshitter is trying to hide the fact that they don't care whether or not what they're saying is true. A lot of the time, a bullshitter just wants you to believe that they believe it, whatever they're saying. So, flattery, for example, is a good example of bullshit. When you flatter someone, like, oh my God, you look so great today, or oh, that's so impressive. I really love how you did this. It's so great. You're so smart. You're so brilliant. Like, if you're really over the top trying to flatter someone, you don't necessarily think that what you're saying is true. You don't necessarily think it's false. Maybe you really do think they're that great, but probably not. You probably don't think that they're like the greatest genius who ever lived or the most beautiful person of all time or the you know, that was the most impressive thing you've ever seen. Like, no, that's probably all false. It might not be, but it probably is. But your goal isn't to communicate facts when you're flattering someone. Your goal is to make the other person like you, or if we're being a little more charitable, maybe to make the other person feel good. And so you're not trying to communicate any information, right? So if you tell the truth about something, you're trying to communicate true information. If you lie about something, you're trying to communicate false information. But if you bullshit, you're not trying to communicate information at all. You're trying to get a certain reaction. If you're flattering someone, that's not lying, but it's not truth telling either. Flattery is bullshit because flattery is not meant to communicate any information. It's just meant to make the other person feel good and to make them like you, in part by making them think that you believe it. You want them to believe that you believe the things you're saying, whether or not they're actually true. You're trying to hide the fact that you don't believe it. You're not trying to hide the actual stuff you're saying, right? Like if I say my dog ate my homework, I'm trying to hide the fact that I didn't do my homework. But if I say uh, you're the smartest person who's ever lived, I might not be trying to hide the fact that you aren't the smartest person who's ever lived. I might just be trying to make you feel good. I'm not actually trying to hide from you the fact that people who like Einstein and Isaac Newton and whoever were smarter than you. Like, I'm not trying to hide information. I'm trying to make you feel good and maybe make you like me. So maybe your audience believes what you're saying. Maybe the person you're trying to flatter believes the flattery. And maybe they don't. But to some extent, if you're flattering someone, you don't care whether or not they believe what you're saying. Whether you believe it isn't the point, and whether they believe it isn't the point. It's just trying to make the other person like you and trying to make them feel good, but usually trying to make them like you. That's what flattery is. It's words that aren't said to communicate information, but words said to make someone like you. And that's bullshit in the very literal sense in Frankfurt's account, because you're saying things not for the purpose of communicating information, but for the purpose of eliciting a certain reaction or creating a certain impression. Namely, making them feel good or making them like you or giving the impression that you really, really like them or think really highly of them. It's trying to create impressions and elicit reactions. It has nothing to do with the actual information contained in the sentences you say. Flattery is one example of bullshit. But if you're ever forced to talk about something that you know nothing about, like if you get called upon to participate in some conversation, like at a party or at a dinner table or something, like about politics or about economics, and you don't know anything about politics or economics, if you don't know anything, you might sort of have to give an opinion, or someone might ask you for your opinion on something. And you've got to say something. Like, you can't just shake your head in silence. Like, you have to say something. But you don't really know anything about the topic. So maybe you just say something that you think sounds good. That's bullshit. That's you saying something not to communicate information, because you don't know if what you're saying is true or false. And you don't really care if the other people believe that what you're saying is true or false. You don't care if they think the political view you're espousing or the economic views that you're espousing are true. You don't care if they believe that. You just care that they get the impression you do have some thoughts about this. That's the goal, to make it seem like you have thought about this or know more about it than you actually do. Because you're being called upon to talk about this, and so you've got to say something. So if you don't know anything, you can't tell the truth because you don't know the truth, and you can't lie because you don't know the truth. So you can't cover up the truth if you don't know it. So you can't tell the truth, you can't lie, you're going to bullshit. You're going to have to bullshit in that scenario. If people ask you about politics or economics and you don't know anything about it, you're going to have to bullshit. You're going to have to say, well, I don't know, something, taxes, something, with no idea whether or not it's true, just because you need to sort of give the impression that, yeah, you've thought about this. You can't say, oh, I know nothing about politics or economics. I don't know anything about politics, and then move on. Like, you have to contribute to the conversation, maybe in this context, in this situation. And then you're going to have to bullshit. You're going to have to make some crap up that sounds good. And the goal is just to give the impression that you actually do have some thoughts about this. Even if they're not good, even if they're not true, just that you have some thoughts. That's all you're trying to do. You're not trying to communicate information. So that's an example of bullshit. Or another example of bullshit in the same kind of line, suppose a kid has to give a book report and they didn't read the book. Well, the kid's going to have to fill up the time by saying some stuff about the book. I did this in elementary school and middle school. I'm sure others did. If you have to give a book report and you didn't read the book, then you've got to fill up the time in the presentation, in the book report, either in the presentation or if it's a written book report, fill up the pages. You have to fill up pages or time or whatever it is with some words about the book. But since you didn't read the book, you don't know what is in the book. So you don't know if the stuff you're saying about the book is true or false. So you're not lying in the book report because you don't even know whether or not what you're saying is true or false. You have no idea what's in the book. So you don't know whether or not you think you like the book or dislike the book. You don't know whether or not the book made good use of symbolism or not. You have no idea, but you've got to say something in the book report because it's due and you didn't read the book. So you're going to have to bullshit. You're going to have to say things without concern for whether or not they're true. If you write a book report or you present a book report without having read the book, you're going to end up saying things without any regard for whether or not they're true. Your concern is not to communicate information about the book in that case. You're not trying to tell people true things about the book, but you're also not trying to lie about the book. You're not trying to hide or cover up any facts about the book. You just have no information and you have to say something. So you're going to say bullshit. You're going to make some stuff up about the book with no regard for whether or not it's true, because you're trying to give the impression that you did read the book. You're trying to give the impression that you did work reading the book that you didn't actually do. And so there is a deception here. You're trying to deceive people into thinking you did more work than you did and that you know more than you know about the book. But you're not trying to deceive people about whether or not the stuff you're saying is true, which would be what a lie is. You're trying to deceive people about whether or not you actually know any information about the book. You're trying to give an impression about you. Or maybe you're just trying to get a grade that isn't a 0. You're just trying to get a better grade than you would get if you said, I didn't read the book, I don't have a book report. Then you'd get a 0. So maybe you're just trying to get a certain reaction from your teacher. You're just trying to get a certain grade. That's also bullshit. That's still bullshit, I mean, because you're saying words, you're giving this book report not with any regard to the actual content of what you're saying. It's purely just spewing out words, trying to get a grade. And that's what bullshitting a paper is. If you bullshit a paper for a class, you're just writing stuff down, trying to get a grade. You don't care if what you're saying is right. You don't care if what you're saying is accurate or true or sort of good, well argued, or anything like that. You're just trying to put words to paper so that you can get a grade out. That's what bullshitting a paper is. And that is a misuse of language. Written words in a paper are meant to communicate information and to present information. And so if you're writing a paper not trying to do that, not trying to communicate information with your words, then you're misusing language in some sense, and you're deceiving or trying to deceive the teacher you're submitting the bullshit paper to, because you want them to think that you're trying to communicate. You want them to think that you're not bullshitting this paper. You want them to believe that you are using language to communicate information here, that you are writing this paper to communicate information like a normal paper would do. But you're not. That's false. You're not trying to communicate any information with this paper. You're just trying to put words on a paper to get a grade. And that's what bullshitting a paper is. When people talk about bullshitting a paper, that's what they mean. It's just spewing out words, try to make them sound good so that you can get a good grade without doing the actual work to know the information you would need to write a good paper, to write a real paper. That's bullshit. And so in the case whether it's a bullshit paper or a bullshit book report, you just need your audience to believe that you did more work than you actually did. You need your audience to believe that you read the book, or that if the statements are false, it's because you misunderstood the book and not because you forgot to read the book. You're just trying to get the audience to believe that you did more work than you actually did. You don't necessarily care if they believe the actual things you say in the book report. You just want them to believe that you did the reading or that you did the actual work you need necessary to write the book report. And that's bullshit. That is bullshit in the, not in the, that's bullshit because I hate it sense, but bullshit in the, that's what bullshit is according to Frankfurt. That it is words written or said in order to, not in order to communicate, but in order to create an impression or elicit a reaction without any regard for whether or not they're true. So maybe when you write your bullshit paper or your bullshit book report, maybe some of what you say is true. That's fine. That stuff is still bullshit. Because if it happens to be true, it's not true, or you didn't write it because it's true. You wrote it because you thought it sounded good and you're trying to get this paper out. You didn't care whether or not it's true. Maybe it turns out to be true. Maybe it turns out to be false. The important thing isn't whether it's true or false. The important thing is whether or not you care that it's true or false. That's what makes it bullshit. The fact that you don't care whether the sentences you're saying are true or false. You only care about getting this certain reaction out of your audience, whether it's a grade or getting them to believe that you read the book or getting them to think that you tried harder than you did. That's all bullshit. Because you're saying things not to communicate information, but to get a certain reaction. And so bullshit can also happen when someone's trying to impress people. So if someone is bragging a lot, that's sort of like self-flattery. Someone who brags a lot makes these big self-aggrandizing statements and talks hyperbolically about how they're one of the smartest people in the world and they've got one of the all-time great memories, or someone who's talking about how cool they are or how successful they are. Someone who's bragging a lot might be saying stuff that's not true. They probably aren't the smartest person who ever lived. They probably don't have one of the greatest memories of all time. They're just trying to impress people. They don't care whether or not what they're saying is true. They probably don't believe that what they're saying is true. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But whether or not the stuff they're saying about themselves is true doesn't determine whether or not it's bullshit. What makes it bullshit is that they don't care whether or not it's true. It's not about whether or not they believe it's true. It's whether or not they care if it's true. And if it's bullshit, that means they don't care whether or not it's true. They're just trying to impress people. They're just trying to get people to think that they're great. And they don't care if what they're saying is true or false. And in that case, the bragger becomes a bullshitter. A lot of bragging is bullshit. And so Frankfurt thinks that bragging can be responsible for a lot of bullshit. Flattery is responsible for a lot of bullshit. But what Frankfurt thinks is partially to blame for a lot of bullshit is having to talk about things that we know nothing about. He says bullshit is unavoidable whenever circumstances require someone to talk without knowing what they're talking about. Thus, the production of bullshit is stimulated whenever a person's obligations or opportunities to speak about some topic are more excessive than their knowledge of the facts that are relevant to that topic. If you have to talk about politics with your family or your friends and you don't know anything about politics, you're going to have to bullshit because you now need to talk about a topic that you don't have any facts about or you don't have many facts about. So you're going to have to make some stuff up. You're going to have to bullshit. That's one reason Frankfurt thinks bullshit happens a lot. Bullshit happens when someone needs to cover up the fact that they're unprepared or that they don't know what they're talking about. And Frankfurt thinks it's unavoidable nowadays, especially because he thinks people nowadays feel like they have to have opinions on events and conditions in all parts of the world. He thinks that we feel like we have to be able to talk about any topic. We have to be able to talk about politics. We have to be able to talk about economics. We have to be able to talk about ethics. We have to be able to talk about world affairs. We have to be able to talk about climate change. We have to be able to talk about science. We have to be able to talk about all these different things that most of us don't really know very much about at all. And so we inevitably end up bullshitting because we talk about stuff that we don't really know anything about. So we have to talk, but we don't really know what we're talking about. And that's bullshitting. That's saying things with no idea whether or not they're true. So definitely with no regard to whether or not they're true. With no idea whether or not they're true, just because we're trying to sort of keep up appearances that we are informed and that we have opinions on things. And we feel like we have to do that because everyone sort of expects everyone to have put some thought into a bunch of different topics. And most people haven't. And so both the liar and the bullshitter are ultimately trying to deceive their audiences. They're trying to get away with something. The liar knows what's true and tries to cover it up by telling you something that isn't true. The bullshitter either doesn't know or doesn't care what's true. They try to cover up that fact, cover up the fact they don't know or don't care, by making statements with no regard to the truth, in order to create a certain impression, to get a certain reaction, maybe get a grade on a paper, or maybe get someone to like you, or maybe get someone to think that you're really smart. You're bullshitting in order to get a certain reaction, rather than trying to get anyone to believe your statements or to communicate any information. And so the essence of bullshit, according to Frankfurt, is this indifference to how things really are, this indifference to whether or not what you're saying is true. That's what bullshit is. It's a misuse of language, because the purpose of language is to communicate information, is to communicate the way things are. And bullshit completely disregards that purpose. It completely pushes that aside and uses language for this whole other way to try not to communicate information, but to try to get someone to like you or to think you're smart or to give you a grade, just to try to get a certain reaction out of someone without communicating information. And Frankfurt thinks bullshit is awful. He thinks bullshit is a greater enemy of truth than lies are. Because the liar at least knows what's true. They're trying to cover up the truth, which isn't good, but they know what's true. The liar at least pays attention to the truth, because they have to know what's true in order to cover it up. But the bullshitter pays no attention to the truth at all, and speaks and acts without any regard to the truth. People talk about how now we live in like a post-truth or post-fact world. That's just a polite way of saying we live in a world that is chock full of bullshit. That there are people who only communicate in bullshit. They never care whether or not what they're saying is true. It's all bullshit. Some people are bullshit. I think some people don't really understand that language can be used in a non-bullshitty way to communicate information. People think of language as just this tool for bullshit. That's how they approach talking. If you've never met someone like that, you've had a very lucky life so far. Good. Try to keep that up. Right. So some people bullshit a lot. And when people talk about living in a post-truth or post-fact world, that's what they mean. A lot of people who are very public bullshit constantly. That's the post-truth thing. It means without regard for whether or not it's true, without any interest in knowing what's true, even. And so Frankfurt thinks that this makes the bullshitter a bigger threat to truth than liars are. Liars pay attention to the truth, but bullshitters don't. And Frankfurt asks, how could a society which cares too little for truth to make sufficiently well-informed decisions concerning the most suitable disposition of its public discourse, how could a society which cared too little for truth make sufficiently well-informed decisions? How could a society which doesn't care about truth make good decisions about anything? It can't. is the answer. And so Frankfurt thinks bullshit is a threat to society base as a whole, because a society which doesn't care about truth cannot make good decisions. And that is the threat of bullshit. All right. So that's the end of the lecture. That's what bullshit is, how it compares to lying, and why Frankfurt thinks it's a problem. So this is our last lecture. So if you have any questions, please let me know. Please don't forget, the Unit 4 assignment is due Thursday of next week. If you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, enjoy the winter break.